The Sean Diddy Combs trial has officially commenced in a New York courtroom, and the very first day has delivered a stark and unsettling portrait of the man behind the music empire. Facing 5 serious felony counts, including racketeering, conspiracy, and sex trafficking, the stakes couldn't be higher. A potential life sentence hangs in the balance. Diddy, who has vehemently pleaded not guilty, sat in court as 2 opposing narratives began to take shape. The prosecution's depiction of a ruthless criminal orchestrating a sex trafficking enterprise, and the defense's acknowledgement of violent behavior framed as domestic disputes, not federal crimes. Assistant U.S. Attorney Emily Johnson wasted no time in her opening statement, painting a chilling other side to the cultural icon Sean Combs. She alleged the existence of a tightly knit inner circle that actively aided him in committing, and crucially, covering up his alleged crimes. Johnson laid out a disturbing scenario where Combs purportedly forced his former girlfriend, Cassie Ventura, into sexual encounters with male escorts, meticulously filming these acts and retaining the recordings as a tool for blackmail. The prosecution further asserted that resources from Diddy's vast business empire were allegedly weaponized to sexually exploit multiple women.
Perhaps the most disturbing revelation was the description of freak-offs, multi-day events allegedly orchestrated by Combs where women, including Ventura, were allegedly drugged and coerced into unwanted sexual acts. What specific evidence or testimony might the prosecution present to corroborate the existence of this inner circle and their role in facilitating these alleged crimes? How will they attempt to prove the use of Diddy's business resources for these illicit activities, and what specific details might they provide about the alleged freak-offs, including the substances used and the methods of coercion? The prosecution's case, Johnson emphasized, will heavily rely on the testimonies of Cassie Ventura and another alleged victim identified under the pseudonym Jane. This immediately puts a spotlight on these 2 individuals and the accounts they are expected to share. Their testimonies will likely be central to the jury's understanding of the alleged pattern of behavior and the specific instances of sex trafficking and exploitation. What specific aspects of Ventura's and Jane's experiences are likely to be the focus of the prosecution's case? How will they attempt to establish a pattern of behavior that links the alleged incidents involving both women? In stark contrast, defense attorney Tenny Garagos offered a different perspective in her opening argument. While acknowledging Combs's violent behavior and labeling the 2016 video of him assaulting Ventura as indefensible, she vehemently insisted that domestic violence is not sex trafficking. This is a crucial distinction and likely the cornerstone of the defense's strategy, to frame the alleged actions as isolated incidents within a tumultuous relationship rather than part of a larger criminal enterprise. How will the defense attempt to explain the other allegations, such as the forced sexual encounters with escorts and the alleged freak-offs, within the context of domestic violence? Will they argue that these were also isolated incidents or misinterpretations of consensual activity? Garagos also made a potentially uncomfortable statement to the jury, informing them that they would hear evidence of Combs's sexual preferences, which might make them uneasy. However, she urged the panel not to judge him based on these preferences. This suggests the defense might attempt to introduce evidence of consensual, albeit perhaps unconventional, sexual activities to counter the prosecution's narrative of forced and exploitative encounters. What specific details about Combs's sexual preferences might the defense reveal, and how will they argue that these preferences are relevant to the charges of sex trafficking and racketeering? How will the prosecution likely respond to this line of defense? Furthermore, Garagos argued that Ventura made a choice to stay with Combs for 11 years and ultimately chose to end the relationship on her own terms. This statement appears to be an attempt to undermine the prosecution's portrayal of Ventura as a victim trapped in a coercive situation. How will the prosecution likely counter this argument, potentially by presenting evidence of emotional manipulation, fear of retaliation, or other factors that might have influenced Ventura's decision to stay in the relationship despite the alleged abuse? The first witness to take the stand was Los Angeles police officer Israel Flores, who recounted responding to a woman in distress call at the Intercontinental Hotel in March 2016. Flores testified to finding Combs and Ventura in the elevator lobby and escorting them back to their hotel room. He further claimed that Combs offered him a wad of cash, which Flores interpreted as a bribe, and that he declined it.
Most significantly, Flores testified that Ventura later left the hotel with a purple eye. However, he admitted to not calling the police at the time because there was no victim there. Obviously, nobody was pressing charges. Why did Officer Flores interpret Combs's offer of cash as a bribe? What specific details did he observe about Ventura's demeanor and injuries that led him to believe she was in distress, even though she did not press charges at the time? The second witness, Daniel Phillip, provided even more disturbing testimony. He described being paid in 2012 to have sex with Ventura, while Combs was allegedly present, masturbating in the corner and directing their actions. Phillip claimed that Combs insisted on the use of baby oil during these encounters and recorded them on at least 1 or 2 occasions. He also testified that Combs once took a picture of his driver's license, which Phillip perceived as a threat. Finally, Phillip recounted witnessing Combs physically assault Ventura at her home, dragging her by her hair into her bedroom, and stated that he did not report it out of fear for his life. What specific instructions did Phillip claim Combs gave during these sexual encounters? How did Phillip interpret the act of Combs taking a picture of his driver's license as a threat? What specific details did Phillip recall about the alleged assault on Ventura that made him fear for his own safety? The opening day of testimony has laid bare 2 vastly different accounts of Sean Combs's behavior and his relationships. The prosecution has presented a chilling narrative of a man who allegedly used his power and resources to exploit and traffic women, while the defense has acknowledged violence but framed it within the context of domestic disputes and consensual, albeit perhaps unconventional, sexual activity. The jury now faces the daunting task of sifting through the evidence and testimony to determine where the truth lies. The key lines from today's proceedings have set the stage for a trial that promises to be both captivating and deeply unsettling. The opening statements delivered by Assistant U.S. Attorney Emily Johnson painted a chilling picture of Sean "Diddy" Combs as not just a music mogul, but the alleged head of a criminal enterprise. Johnson meticulously outlined the prosecution's case, asserting that Combs utilized an inner circle to facilitate and conceal his alleged crimes, which include racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking, and transportation for prostitution. A central pillar of her opening was the claim that Combs exerted significant control over his former girlfriend, Cassie Ventura, forcing her into sexual encounters with male escorts. The prosecution further alleged that these encounters were filmed and the recordings were used as a means of blackmail, highlighting a disturbing pattern of manipulation and control. The assertion that Combs's vast business resources were allegedly employed to facilitate the sexual exploitation of multiple women adds another layer of complexity and potential criminal culpability to the case. The description of freak-offs, alleged multi-day events where women, including Ventura, were purportedly drugged and coerced into unwanted sexual acts, paints a particularly disturbing picture of the environment Combs allegedly fostered. What specific financial records or business communications might the prosecution present to demonstrate the alleged misuse of Combs's company resources for illicit activities? How will they attempt to prove the element of coercion and lack of consent in the alleged freak-offs? And what specific testimony or evidence might they offer regarding the alleged drugging of victims? Johnson made it clear that the prosecution's case will heavily rely on the testimonies of Cassie Ventura and another alleged victim identified as Jane. These 2 individuals are expected to provide first-hand accounts of the alleged abuse and exploitation they endured. Their testimonies will be crucial in establishing a pattern of behavior and corroborating the prosecution's broader claims against Combs. What specific details about the alleged power dynamics and control exerted by Combs are likely to emerge from Ventura's and Jane's testimonies? How might the prosecution structure their questioning to elicit the most impactful and legally relevant information from these witnesses? In a starkly contrasting opening argument, defense attorney Tenny Garagos acknowledged Sean Combs's history of violent behavior, even labeling the 2016 video depicting him assaulting Ventura as indefensible. However, Garagos drew a crucial legal distinction, asserting that domestic violence is not sex trafficking. This statement signals the core of the defense's strategy: to acknowledge the problematic aspects of Combs's past behavior while arguing that it does not meet the legal threshold for the federal charges he faces. How will the defense attempt to explain the other allegations, such as the alleged forced sexual encounters with escorts and the purported freak-offs, within the context of domestic violence or consensual, albeit unconventional, relationships? Will they attempt to discredit the testimonies of Ventura and Jane or offer alternative explanations for the alleged events? Garagos also made a potentially uncomfortable point to the jury, stating that they would hear evidence regarding Combs's sexual preferences that might be unsettling. However, she urged the jury to refrain from judging him based on these preferences. This suggests the defense might introduce details about consensual, perhaps unconventional, sexual activities to counter the prosecution's narrative of forced and exploitative encounters. What specific details about Combs' sexual preferences might the defense reveal, and how will they argue that these preferences are relevant to the charges of sex trafficking and racketeering? What legal arguments might the prosecution raise to object to the introduction of such evidence, arguing that it is irrelevant or prejudicial? Furthermore, Garagos argued that Cassie Ventura made a choice to remain in a relationship with Combs for 11 years and ultimately decided to end it on her own terms. This statement directly challenges the prosecution's portrayal of Ventura as a victim trapped in a coercive and exploitative situation. How will the prosecution likely counter this argument? Will they present evidence of emotional manipulation, financial dependence, threats, or other factors that might have influenced Ventura's decisions and limited her agency within the relationship? The first witness to take the stand was LAPD officer Israel Flores, who recounted responding to a woman in distress call involving Combs and Ventura at a hotel in 2016. Flores testified to observing Ventura with a purple eye and claimed that Combs offered him a wad of cash, which he interpreted as a bribe. However, Flores admitted that he did not file a police report at the time because Ventura did not explicitly identify herself as a victim or press charges. What legal protocols and considerations might have influenced Officer Flores's decision not to file a report despite his observations and the alleged bribe attempt? How might the defense use Flores's inaction to suggest that Ventura did not perceive herself as a victim of sex trafficking at the time of the incident? The second witness, Daniel Phillip, provided disturbing testimony about his alleged interactions with Combs and Ventura. He claimed to have been paid for sexual encounters with Ventura while Combs was present, allegedly directing their actions and recording them. Phillip also testified that Combs took a picture of his driver's license in a manner he perceived as a threat and recounted witnessing Combs physically assault Ventura. Phillip stated that he did not report the alleged assault out of fear for his own life. What specific details did Phillip provide about the alleged directions Combs gave during the sexual encounters? How did he articulate his fear for his life, and what specific aspects of the alleged threat involving his driver's license led to this fear? How might the defense attack Phillip's credibility or motivation for testifying? The opening day of Sean Combs's trial has laid the foundation for a complex and highly contentious legal battle. The prosecution has presented a narrative of a powerful figure allegedly orchestrating a criminal enterprise involving sex trafficking and exploitation, while the defense has acknowledged past violent behavior but argued that it does not constitute the federal crimes charged. The contrasting accounts and the testimonies of the first two witnesses have set the stage for a trial that promises to be closely watched and intensely debated. The jury now faces the critical task of weighing the evidence and determining the truth amidst these conflicting narratives. To stay informed about every significant development in the Sean Diddy Combs trial, including in-depth analysis of witness testimonies, legal strategies, and potential turning points, make sure you are subscribed to CEtrends and have your notifications turned on.
We are committed to bringing you comprehensive and insightful coverage of this landmark celebrity legal case. If you're intrigued by the intricacies of high-profile celebrity trials and the legal battles that unfold within the courtroom, be sure to check out our videos on Inside the Court. The First Testimony Reveals All, or our video analyzing Why is Diddy Reading the Bible? What Does He Fear? You can find the links to these videos on your screen right now. Thank you for joining us at CEtrends for this important story. We'll be back with more updates as the trial progresses.